Popcorn Poops is brought to you by Audible.com. Please visit audibletrial.com/popcornpoops for a free audiobook and a free 30-day trial of their subscription service. Audible is the internet's leading provider of audiobooks with more than 150,000 downloadable titles across all types of literature, including fiction, nonfiction, and periodicals. Audible.com is offering a free audiobook download to listeners of Popcorn Poops along with a 30-day trial of their services. This week we're recommending Hayao Miyazaki, Master of Japanese Animation, by Helen McCarthy, narrated by James Yaegashi. To download this or another audiobook of your choice, visit audibletrial.com/popcornpoops. Again, that's audibletrial.com/popcornpoops for your free audiobook.
We are the Popcorn Poops. Hey everybody, and welcome to Popcorn Poops, the best married couple movie podcast / commentary track hybrid audio program on the internet. My name is Dustin.
And I'm Jessica.
This month, our theme is anime films, and my pick for this week's episode is Katsuhiro Otomo's 1988 film, Akira.
If you are syncing this recording up to the movie, go ahead and start the film, and then press pause as soon as the Toho vanity card completely fades to black.
It's time to start the movie. Sinkers, press play at the beep after the countdown. Ready? 3, 2, 1. And this should be an interesting episode, considering that this is widely regarded as one of the most difficult to understand movies, also one of the best movies of all time, but one of the most difficult to understand movies, specifically the ending. And I have my idea of what the ending is, of course, in relationship to the rest of the film, which we will, of course, talk about. And I assume that you have an idea of what the ending is, and we'll be able to get into that. But
I guess so. I didn't really think, I sincerely didn't think it was that big of a deal that, the ending was a problem, a point of discussion for people.
Right, I think it's only difficult to understand because the movie doesn't hold your hand at all.
Yeah, well, it's a Japanese movie, so
right. Well, yes, of course. But yeah, it's very light on information and very light on exposition, and not necessarily what's going on, but why things are going on in the narrative, especially toward the end. I think that most of the movie is actually quite easy to follow. As far as the narrative is concerned, I think it's pretty easy to see exactly what's going on. And I think the narrative actually does play like any good narrative should, that it's really based on the concept of cause and effect, that this thing happens that leads to this thing happening that subsequently leads to this, that, and the next thing, right?
Yeah.
So I think that as far as on a narrative screenplay level, I think it's quite solid. But I think that I'm going to have maybe some unpopular opinions about this movie. Going through this most recent time in preparation for this, I found some things in the movie that I don't really care for, that don't jive with me, specifically politically. Mm-hmm. I think the movie is kind of politically strange.
I think so too.
And of course we'll talk about that. But this, I've seen this movie, I don't know, a dozen times or more, I think. But I think this is your first time completing the movie. You've sat through a good chunk of it.
Yeah. Of course, I've been a fan of anime since I was a kid, and so at various points in my life, there were opportunities where it was just on with the people who I was with. It was on TV or on their TVs, and of course with you too, I've seen you sit through it a few times, and I've sat through parts of it again and again, and this was the first time that I sat through the whole thing from beginning to end and paid attention.
Right. And that's the key, is paying attention, because I think that probably for the dozen or so times that I've seen the movie, I think that I really only paid attention, to it, maybe twice.
And it's definitely one of those movies where you have to pay attention.
You definitely have to if you want to understand everything that's going on and exactly what the movie's trying to say specifically. I think it is a really great movie to just watch and kind of let it just wash over
absorb
you.
It.
Exactly. You specifically were saying that you really, really like certain parts of the movie, and until those moments happen, you kind of got down on it, I guess?
I repeatedly throughout this movie, it was like I was thrown back and forth again and again, where I would get into a chunk of the movie where I'd been sitting there for a while, and I was just like, I'm kind of not liking this. And then they do something that would just pull me back into it. And it's for those moments in the movie that I understand why it's as important as it is in not just in anime, but in cinema. And it's for those moments in the movie that I will say that I did enjoy it, that I liked it, that I think it's a great movie. But I'm not really in love with it, to be honest.
Really? That's interesting.
I'm really not. And I know that is an incredibly, like you said, unpopular opinion to have of this movie.
Yeah, a little bit, but I think that it's good that we're not approaching this movie from the position of wanting to fillate it. I think that
we've done before.
We have. We
Poltergeist.
Yes, Poltergeist. Like I have a problem seeing any flaws in Poltergeist because I'm just in love with that film, and I'm in love with this film for a different reason, I think. But I think really looking at the movie and trying to pick it apart and unpack all the things that are in it is quite revealing. And for someone who is at all politically minded, especially with sociopolitics and things like that, I think that if you don't come away with from this movie with an opinion about what it has to say, then you're probably not getting it.
Yeah, you're missing the point.
Right, exactly. But not to say that I think that you can't watch this movie just, again, for the power of cinema, allowing it to wash over you and to kind of see
just
these
the visceral
amazing,
experience.
Yeah, like the city, like we're
the
seeing them.
The city is incredible.
We're seeing them drive through Neo Tokyo right now, and it's just beautiful.
And the score here too. I love this part of the score where it's just breathing sometimes, just breathing and drums, and then
there's a lot of percussive sounds that are made with the human mouth only, and I think that's really cool and kind of novel.
And of course, in various scenes throughout this entire movie, there are these moments where there's just a lot of shouting and chanting, and it straight up sounds like a matsuri. That's the image that just kept going through my head again and again and again.
Well, that's an interesting point that you make. I do have a note here about this. So the soundtrack here specifically and all throughout the movie is really heavily influenced by traditional Japanese music, implementing traditional instruments like the shamisen, the shakuhachi, and the taiko drum, and of course the melodies and rhythms that are drawn from that style. The most prominent lyric in the song that I think just wrapped up, the one that you'll probably remember the most because they repeat it over and over and over again, besides of course the characters' names where they're like Tetsuo Kaneda and all that shit, is Dase 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 Da Dase 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 Da. That is actually a chant that's used in Japanese festivals. You said matsuri. Matsuri is the Japanese word for a festival, and it's likely the origin of this particular chant, which doesn't actually have any direct translation. It's like kind of hoo-ah or let's go. It's kind of this motivational sound that one produces, I guess.
And if you're at a festival, then you're going to hear it when you're eating your takoyaki and you're standing on the side of the street and people are going by in traditional clothes and they're chanting and they're dancing.
Yes, and they're pulling like the mobile shrines and stuff through the streets. They use it in parades and stuff.
The floats and things.
The origin of the chant, that specific chant, the Dase 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 Da chant, is likely from the Aomori Nebuta or Nebuta Matsuri, which is up in Aomori Prefecture, which is it's the northernmost prefecture on Honshu, which is the main island, so just south of Hokkaido, which is the northmost island.
We've never been there, but we have a lot of friends who lived there for a long time.
Definitely. And I hear the ramen is very good. and
there's a lot of snow.
Yes. Actually, ramen tastes better when it's cold, so it makes sense that the ramen up in Aomori and in Hokkaido in general. Specifically, I've heard that Hakodate ramen is particularly good, and it's making me really hungry right now. I kind of wish we weren't sitting at the beginning of a 2-hour movie.
Yeah, well, actually, my great secret is that I live in Japan, and I don't like ramen.
No, you don't. That's true. But to be fair, ramen is actually Chinese food.
That's true.
Yeah,
also true.
Same thing as lo mein. Did you know that? And we're not even talking about Akira anymore. I've got plenty of notes. But here's a fun little factoid. Damen actually comes from the same word that lo mein comes from in Chinese. It is actually
really?
Chinese food, yeah. But in the United States, it's interesting that those two things got separated by preparation style. So what we call, and the words sound similar. Like if you think about it, lo mein and damen, they come from the same original Chinese word. But in the United States, of course, those things got separated into like a dry noodle dish, which is lo mein, which we consider Chinese food, and then damen, which is the
mistakenly considered Japanese food.
Exactly. But yeah, that's something that has nothing to do with what we're watching right now. So let's catch up on the story. We're seeing some pretty intense stuff going down right now, but I want to catch us up on the story, and that's something I think we're going to have to do through this episode to make sure that all of our points are made.
Yeah, sure. Let's understand the story together.
Let's
How
understand
to watch movie.
Akira.
Here we go.
Okay, so the very top of the movie, we get a date stamp and a location stamp, and it is July 16th, 1988 in Tokyo, and we see an explosion in the center of Tokyo, a giant like dome-like white explosion that engulfs the entire city. Then we get another text card that says 31 years after World War III, AD 2019, Neo-Tokyo. And then we get the title card, the big block red letters, Akira. I also will make a point later about how I think red is an important color in this movie. It's kind of the central color, if you will. So we start the movie, and this punk guy walks into the Harukiya bar, and he orders 3 peanuts, in air quotes because they're drugs. But the bartender takes them away quickly when someone enters the bar loudly, and then that young man walks over to Kaneda, who is ostensibly our protagonist.
I guess so, yeah.
I guess. Kind of an anti-hero. Not very likable. No one in this movie is really likable.
Well, he's more likable than some of the other characters.
Sure.
So.
I think it's kind of the point, though. And he tells him this punk kid tells Kaneda that they found the clown gang, or they've herded the clown gang onto Route 5, and they all leave and head out to fight the clowns. Now, just to make a couple points about Harukiya. Harukiya actually means spring tree house, which has nothing to do with anything. I just thought I'd translate it for you. The kanji on the outside.
Yeah, and we'll do that a few times throughout this movie. We'll tell you some really useless information that...
Yes, the bar that they frequent is called Harukiya, and it means spring tree house, and that's
there you go.
There
now
you
know.
Go. Something that's interesting, in that first scene, you see a newscast that says that unemployed workers that were created by tax reforms enacted by the Prime Minister are rioting all across Japan. And this is kind of setting the stage for this film. And, of course, internal conflict indicates that a solution is a ways off. And I think that this is a really interesting way to build the world that we will see continue throughout the film, and kind of sets the tone for everything. And the social unrest that, we're watching riot police fight off civilians right now and throw student protesters. And it's very, this movie was made in 1988, and it's to see this kind of thing. It's amazing how relevant it still is. Like even considering, the rioting that happened in Ferguson very recently, as of last year. It's amazing how relevant this kind of imagery is and will continue to be, because as long as there are societies, there will be social unrest somewhere. And I don't know. It's interesting how that concept right there is kind of timeless. This movie is like 30 years old. It's almost 30 years old. So I find that very interesting. So outside, we get to meet Tetsuo, who we're seeing riding on a motorcycle right now. And he's admiring Kaneda's motorcycle, which is this super awesome red souped up thing that none of the other gang members, they never refer to them as this, but I guess they're called the Capsule Gang. And you can see a capsule on the back of
Kaneda's
Yeah, there's kind of an
jacket.
ongoing message about drugs, and I think there's kind of a lame anti-drug message in the movie.
There?
Yeah, I think there is. I think there's the movie's trying to say something about it, but it never really gets.
It never gets there.
Yeah,
then.
it never really finds its footing. But there's something about drugs, obviously. Across not just recreational drugs, but it crosses over into the medical use
medicinal
of drugs
stuff
and,
too. Yeah.
Scientific experimentation on humans and things like that. So the movie's trying to say something. What exactly? I don't know. I don't think it really says anything. But So he is admiring this bike, and Kaneda says that he would never be able to ride it because it's customized to him, right? And
Right.
Tetsuo disagrees, and he gets on his own bike, and they ride off. And I think that there we're already getting a bit of Tetsuo's character. He looks up to Kaneda and wants to be as good as him, and the bike will remain this throughout the course of the movie. The bike is a symbol of Kaneda's influence and power in the Capsule Gang. And power is a central theme in this movie. Power is very, very important to understanding Tetsuo's character and understanding what is at the core of this movie about, scientific progress and things like that, where it's coming from politically. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. So they've just, drove through the city in this wonderful sequence where they're, driving through the streets, and you can see the trails off of their motorcycle lights and stuff like that. It's really iconic imagery that everyone thinks of when they think of Akira. And it's something that doesn't ever come back up in the movie, like that. The tail light streaming sequence is only at the beginning, never happens again.
And the thing is that stuff in the movie, I mean, I really enjoyed that part. I liked that stuff. I thought it was fun. I thought it was interesting. I was into it. And when we got to this point where we have the numbers, is that what they're called? The numbers?
The kids, they have names, but
but yes, they have names, but I feel like someone refers to them as the numbers at some point.
Maybe.
But the kids who are kind of gray-skinned, and I guess they're supposed to be aged.
They have the stature, and they have the look of children, but like white hair and wrinkly faces, as though they're old. Like
and their skin is.
They got the Benjamin Button
color.
thing going on.
Yeah. So by the time we got to this point in the movie where we are now, and I realized that this actually wasn't just going to be about racing through the city and
oh, you thought it was just
bikes
going to be like a motorcycle movie?
Well, no, I mean I knew it had to do with motorcycles, and I knew that there was something else to it, but I thought that this movie was going to have more of that in it, and
it doesn't.
And it doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Is what I'm trying to say.
That's interesting. I think that outwardly that is kind of the image of the movie. Like,
and it
even
has
the movie
very
poster.
little.
Yeah, the movie poster and all of the media and stuff. The most famous image from like the promotional material of this movie
is him and the bike.
Yeah, like him walking up to his motorcycle. So, yeah, that is interesting that it's not more prominent.
Mm-hmm. Even though that's, like I said, the image that I had of this movie.
So as they're riding through the city, the interesting thing to me is that they're not only attacking clowns, they're also harassing people, like civilians, like
the
throwing
car.
yeah.
But wasn't it the clowns who were attacking the civilians?
I think it was the capsules, the capsule group
too.
Yeah, as well. I almost said Capsule Corps, like from Dragon Ball Z.
Oh dear.
Yeah, that's a different thing. But yeah, they're harassing clowns and civilians alike, and kind of establishing themselves as not terribly. Oh, this shot right here, I want to say something about.
I wanted to too.
The Tokyo Olympics that are supposed to happen in 2020. Akira called it.
They did.
They totally called it.
Because of course the movie is set in 2019.
Yes.
And the sign that we just saw, it states that the 30th Olympics is going to be held in Tokyo.
Right. In
Japanese, it says Tokyo Olympics, and then it also says 147 days till the Tokyo Olympics.
Yeah, till the opening ceremonies.
And then now, actually, in reality, the 2020 Olympics that are going to be here in Tokyo will be the 32nd modern Olympics. But I mean, hell, that's pretty close.
Yeah.
Right? Like, to predict.
How do you mess that up, though?
How do you mess up the year?
Because there's unless
also it
they
being
missed
2019.
Well, okay, all right. 30 years after World War III, maybe we can assume that 2 Olympics were skipped because of the war.
Okay, we can assume that.
Okay, that's enough. That's fair.
But why 2019 and not 2020?
Oh, 147 days from that time, it'll be 2020.
Then it'll be 2020.
It'll
okay,
be 2020.
I get what you're saying. So, but I mean, that's a pretty cool prediction.
Yeah, it's cool, right? I remember when Tokyo was selected, as the city for the 2020 Olympics. The internet kind of exploded a little bit in certain pockets, especially like from anime fandom and whatnot, because they were like, oh my God, Akira fucking called it.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool, right?
When I think of the Olympics being here, though, all I think of is how horrible it will be for anyone who actually lives and works in Tokyo, and how life will just cease to exist.
So as they're riding around the city and they're wreaking havoc and creating unlikable characters of our protagonists, basically, which again,
but still, they're still fun though. Like the way their banter and stuff with each other is still fun.
Oh yeah, they're definitely fun to watch, but I don't think they're very sympathetic.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think that you definitely don't like what they're doing. I don't think you're not meant to. I think that's kind of the point. But Tetsuo is not even like that good of a motorcycle rider. Like he falls off of his bike at one point and the gang members kind of make fun of him for it, and that's more Tetsuo development. He's not even as good as his other gang members, much less Kaneda. I mean, I think they really set him up really early on. Not only is he less than Kaneda, or in his mind he thinks so, but Kaneda's kind of the top of the totem pole and he's at the bottom.
Yeah.
He is the worst of them, right? I do have a note here about the drugs. I don't know. I'm going to throw this your way. This is really kind of stupid and obtuse, but let's say the capsule gang represents drugs.
Okay.
And the clowns represent entertainment. Mm-hmm. And so these are like two plebeian distractions for the benefit of those in power, which is something else that comes up later in the narrative. Mm-hmm. Kind of ties into our discussion of Gladiator a little bit. But do you think that's relevant at all? I don't know. That's something I threw in here because I was like, that's kind of interesting. Why clowns? Why pills?
Well, I mean, I definitely think that plays into one of the lines later that the Colonel says, where he's talking about the world that they live in, like the hedonistic world that they live in.
Yeah.
And I think that is repeatedly shown through examples of things like drugs and sex, like sex on the streets constantly. Like people just, there are so many shots in this movie of people just fondling each other in public.
Not the Japan that I know. Not the Japan that I live in right now.
The Japan I live in is the one where if you hold hands with your boyfriend or girlfriend outside of high school and somebody sees you, you might get kicked out of high school.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So, I mean, yeah, it's the sexuality and stuff that's everywhere, the drugs, the violence, that kind of stuff. I think it's
interesting because I feel like the world they've created for Neo Tokyo is actually much more Western.
Yeah, that's very true.
Like the idea that public opinion can get to such a fever pitch that riots actually happen is something that I can't see in Japan of today.
Yeah.
Right?
Trying to picture riots in Japan,
this is a very different world.
That's very,
different world.
very difficult to picture.
And I think that for a Western audience, you see this, and a lot of this stuff kind of bounces off of you a little bit.
Yeah, it feels normal.
Yeah,
right?
You're just like,
I mean,
okay,
not normal, but I mean, the idea of something escalating to student riots and stuff like that is not at all out of the realm of possibilities for America or for anywhere in the West, really. But the idea of that in Japan is pretty extreme, I think. I mean, we're talking about a country where even during the earthquake, during the big earthquake, there was nothing like that. There was nothing like that. People did not riot. People did not steal things. People stood in their queues.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it happened, but it was like ridiculously. It was not very common for it to happen, and compared to
the amount of destruction that happened,
definitely. Well, and compared to those kind of upsets that might happen in the Western world where looting might occur, I think that the it happened percentage wise a lot less here for whatever reason. It's a culture
here.
thing, right? Actually, I wanted to say something about this. Is a little bit of trivia. In the riot scene toward the beginning of the movie, our character Kay, who's the female revolutionary, she pushes past a man wearing a Young Magazine t-shirt, and Young Magazine was actually the bi-monthly comics anthology series that the original Akira manga was serialized in.
So here, we're in the scene where I realized, Yes. This is the kind of movie I'm getting into, because
The science fiction starts.
we suddenly get this overload of science fiction information, just technobabble out the wazoo.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for me, that's part of what I don't love about this movie, because I love sci-fi. I am a super sci-fi fan, but like the amount of technobabble that I like in my sci-fi is kind of like Star Trek level.
Yeah.
And
just enough to where
just
you know
enough
what's
that I
going
believe
on,
it,
and
that
then they can do whatever they're doing
Right.
with the story, right?
I want to believe that it's real. I want to believe there's science behind what they're doing, but I'm not really in it to figure out how their quantum mechanics shit works. Like,
Yeah.
I don't care.
You're not in it to learn something, right?
I'm in it to get the plot and the story and everything in the kind of setting that I want, with the kind of tones that I expect from sci-fi. And when I get just filled with an overload of technobabble, then I lose interest, because if I'm expected to understand what's going on in the plot based on stuff that isn't real and that is incredibly confusing because it's not real and it's hard sci-fi, like super hard sci-fi, personally, I lose interest. And that scene where we saw the doctor for the first time and the colonel was talking to him, there was a lot of, well, if we use the latest examination equipment to collect even more data and do a multifaceted analysis of blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, well, don't care.
Done. At that point, your brain just kind of springs a leak, and you're like, no, and take a nap.
And then take a micro nap. And meet Freddy Krueger for a while.
Laser tongue. Please go back and listen to that episode. Available now at popcornpoops.com.
I don't like these girls also.
Yeah.
Kind of hate them.
Right?
Kind of hate them a lot, where we just met the girls in, I guess it's their high school? Or are these supposed to be junior high school kids?
I think the high school, probably high school.
Japan loves to do the junior high thing when we're supposed to expect that they're kind of almost adults, but they're in junior high. And that comes from the fact that junior high lasts for a year longer here. High school is only 3 years long. It's the last 3 years of of American high school.
Yes.
So junior high includes like our 9th grade. Mm-hmm. And also after junior high, now this may have changed recently, but high school was optional.
Yeah. In Japan. I don't know if it's the only thing that I know changed is that high school is now free.
Oh, that's what changed.
Yeah.
Then high school is still optional.
In Japan, high school you used to have to pay for high school, and most people went, but it was not. You had to pay for it, and it was optional.
There was not a free option, but now there is most high schools. A lot of high schools you still have to pay.
I don't know that it's exactly the grade thing. I think it's when you're 15, you're allowed to drop out of school of your own volition.
Right. And I know a lot of people who didn't go to high school. They just
I know some, yeah.
skipped it entirely, and that's not that strange here. So
and to be fair, to maybe Americans thinking, "Oh my god, that's so crazy and backwards and ridiculous." The amount of education, the things that they learn in school in Japan, and the amount of time that they learn it, by the time they're done with junior high school, they basically have a high school education in the United States.
Yes, also true.
More or less, like minus maybe a year, maybe just a semester.
And some much needed social development during those years too.
I think that's a lot more important, especially for this country in which, of course, the birth rate is so low, and you've got an entire culture of people who don't understand the value of a sexual relationship. Outside of just like, oh, well, it's for making babies.
Yeah, which, of course, is a big political topic here.
That AKIRA doesn't have anything to say about. If anything, the people, I think that probably the view of the filmmakers making AKIRA probably created this world to be over-sexual.
Yeah, it
so
is.
the people like making out and, fondling each other on the streets and stuff like that, we don't look up to them. Right. Exactly. They're kind of framed poorly, I think. So at Kaneda's high school, the translation of the high school is actually the 8th District Youth Vocational High School. So he doesn't actually go to a real high school. He goes to a vocational high school where he's learning a trade because he's a layabout. He's a punk.
Right.
He's not good enough to get into an actual high school, so he goes to a vocational high school to learn a trade. And there's a shot later on, or maybe we already saw it, where they're in a classroom where there's like an engine like sitting up on a desk where it's obviously like some kind of automotive shop type class. But yeah, what they do in school, I mean, the school in the way it's framed in the movie is filthy. There are hardly any teachers around like teaching them, and they don't have much influence on the kids, and the influence they have is quite literally beating them and punching them in the face. Like that's what they do.
Well, and that's something too that I think you see in a lot of anime. A lot of anime have like these bad high schools, these notoriously bad high schools with gangsters and stuff that attend the high schools, and I think that comes from the fact that not just with high school, but junior high as well. You have to test to get into it. You have to get certain scores on those certain high schools tests to try and get into the schools, and they rank their high schools, and the kids who don't do well get into the crappier high schools or the crappier junior highs, and those junior highs and those high schools are notoriously much worse places.
Yeah.
Sometimes scarier places even. I mean, nothing's really scary here in this country, but
No, not really. Just earthquakes.
I guess that.
So I think speaking of public schools, I think it was really interesting that after the whole battle on the highway with the clowns, Kaneda and his gang were interrogated by police who were looking for anti-government protesters. Mm-hmm. So they rallied up all these people that were doing various kinds of, destruction or whatever, being involved in the riots and whatnot. And after a little questioning, they realized that they're not those people, right? They're not part of the group. But you can see that they're being questioned inside a school gym. Right? So, as public schools are public facilities, it makes sense that the police or army would set up a temporary questioning facility in a school gym to deal with a large number of interrogations. But the contrast of such activities happening at a school is really stark and frightening. And I think that, that just goes into this concept of world building that I think is one of the best things about this movie. Mm-hmm. I think if there's one thing that you can take away from this movie that it does absolutely perfectly is it builds its world so well. Actually, this is something I think you wanted to talk about what's happening right now.
Yes, it is. Because this is... So we've gotten to the scene. We got through the whole thing where Tetsuo rode away on the bike with his girlfriend.
Well, he escaped the facility. He had been being tested on. He escaped from the facility, met up with his girlfriend, Kaori, then went to the school, stole Kaneda's bicycle, and then encountered clowns who overcame him.
Proceeded to beat up Kaori and rip off her clothes, and so we saw some titties, and then unfortunately in this case, and then we have Tetsuo in the scene. He starts freaking out and he starts doing he's
having hallucinations.
Yeah, hallucinations and stuff. And I mean, this is this is so overused, right? And as I was watching it, I wasn't criticizing it in my head, but I just knew where it was going to go. And overused isn't the word I mean. I just mean it's something common. This is a thing that we see a lot in movies that have somebody who's being experimented on, or they're changing mentally because of whatever. They have breakdowns and they have hallucinations or flashbacks or whatever. And I expect where they're going to go, and this movie just derailed and took it somewhere else for me, and I was like, holy shit. This was the moment in this movie where, for the first time, where I was like, man, I'm into this. When his knees hit the ground, and then the floor, the road splits open beneath him, and he falls through it. Yeah. And then that forward momentum as he's falling into the earth shows his guts spilling out of his stomach.
It's a hard cut back to the road that hasn't actually split open, but they use that forward momentum, visually, and transfer it into this image of guts falling out of his body, like his entrails coming out.
And then cuts away then to what is really going on, where the road isn't split and his guts aren't out on the floor, but you see him frantically scraping up his guts.
Yeah, where he's like scraping at the air, obviously trying to put his guts back in. Yeah.
And I'm just like that was the moment where I was like, man, they did something that shocked me and that was entirely effective, because generally in these kind of scenes we have breakdowns and people fall to their knees, and usually they do have headaches and things like that, and I expect that stuff and I'm fine with it and I go with it, and but in this scene they just took it somewhere else and I believed it, and I was like, man, he is messed up. I believe he's messed up from this.
Yeah.
And it's for those moments in this movie that I did really enjoy it.
Some of the images that Tetsuo sees are lifted directly from later in the film, actually. However, other shots simply parallel the things that we see later, but are not foreshadowed literally. For example, his entrails coming out resemble the shot when his mechanical arm falls from his cape at the stadium and falls down.
Yeah.
It looks like the same shot, basically. And also what is it? Yes. So also the shot of him falling through the asphalt resembles the shot of Kaneda falling into Akira's energy field with like crumbling buildings all around him. It's really similar to that shot too. And of course, at this point in the story, Tetsuo's consciousness is blending with, or later in the film, I mean, at that point in the film, Tetsuo's consciousness is blending with Kaneda's, Akira's, and the three psychic children's. So it kind of makes sense that he might see something from that moment the audience might consider technically from Kaneda's point of view, but that's not until way later in the movie. There was something when Tetsuo finds Kaori in her dorm after she's doing laundry. Actually, there's a girl that's having a conversation on a phone. Did you notice that?
Yes.
So the girl having a conversation on the phone, she's talking about like, her dorm mother and stuff like that, and just basically bad mouthing people who are older than her, just in general. And that's another bit of world building. It's indicative of a disrespectful or revolting youth culture. And
there's a lot of commentary when the bikers go by of kids these days and things like that.
Yeah. And some might consider Tetsuo himself representative of the adolescent rebellion that comes from feeling like authority figures are trying to indoctrinate you with ideas that you kind of recoil against naturally. And I think that's also part of his character arc throughout this thing, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, so we just came from a scene where...
here in this shot...
go ahead.
You see the ladder stuff on the ground. Right now we're looking... It's one of the flashbacks. And we see a bunch of...
There's like a cross hatch thing on the that they drew with chalk.
We were looking at all the chalk stuff, and one of the little random tidbits here that I can give you is that the thing with the lines that looked like a bunch of ladders stacked up next to each other is a lottery ladder game called Amidakuji, which is like children use it a lot. They also use it as a way for like selecting jobs or things like that. And we saw there were 4 options, and it was children's handwriting, so it was kind of difficult to read them. But I know at least 2 of them, Baka and Manuke, both mean old or both mean stupid. Manuke is an old version of like Baka, basically. But the other ones I couldn't catch because...
I remember the one, I think
scrolling.
Now that I think about it, there was one that looked like it said Maho.
Maho, yeah.
But I think it actually, now in retrospect, I think that's actually Aho, which is another word for like an asshole.
I thought maybe it was but it looked kind of like
I think
the
it's Aho, which is another word for like asshole or
Okay,
jerk
well
or
then
like
maybe all of them then were like foul words for name calling.
Yeah, something that kids probably shouldn't say. Yeah, exactly.
And they were playing the game to like see like which bad word they were going to get randomly.
Yeah.
It's a game where you can't predict the result. There's no way to predict it.
Right. Now we came from a scene where the girls, all of the gang's girlfriends, they were all out with their Tetsuo and or not Tetsuo, but Kaneda and the gang. And there's a little idiom that happens here, an idiom that's said.
It's such a weird
You
translation.
made a note about it, I think.
I did.
It is strange, but there's a moment when there's a girl who says something along the lines of they're like skirt chasers out of water, and then
Talking about them being without their bikes.
Right, they're without their bikes for whatever reason. I'm not even sure why they're without their bikes. They make some mention of like there being checkpoints and things, and there are people like being stupid and out,
on their bikes anyways, but they shouldn't be.
But they shouldn't be, which to me it seems like something that this gang would do.
They would do,
yeah,
right?
It's like,
so
who gives a they don't give a fuck. They have no fucks to give.
But the girls are kind of bored with them because
yes. And
they
one
don't
of
have their bikes.
One of them says that the guys without their bikes are like fish out of, or like skirt chasers out of water, and then she's corrected by one of the guys, I think it's Kai, and they only say his name once in the movie, and it's, that's another, I talked about this last week. When you don't put your characters' names in other characters' mouths so that we know who they are, like the doctor and the colonel, they have names.
I just know doctor and colonel.
Right, exactly. The colonel is
I
Colonel.
didn't even bother to look it up.
I think it's Colonel Shikishima, and the doctor is Dr. Onishi. They never say that in the movie.
Okay.
Ever.
Well, then I feel less bad about not knowing their names because I don't.
Yeah, but back to the idiom, he corrects her and he says that it's actually fish, or so it says in the
translation in the subtitles.
Yeah. But what he actually says in Japanese, he doesn't say fish, he says kappa, which is an aquatic creature from Japanese folklore.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not sure what the actual idiom she says is because she's speaking like a
super Yankee.
Yeah, Yankee is. Okay, Yankee is not what it means in America. In Japan, a Yankee or Yankee is like a.
It's like like
a punk.
Like a punk.
It's like a punk. It's the same thing. Actually, last week when we had, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? There was someone that drove by on a crotch rocket, and we made mention of Bosozoku. Yeah, Bosozoku.
The bikers.
Actually, Kaneda and his gang, they are Bosozoku. That's what they are.
And they roll their R's and stuff.
R sounds. Like that.
Yeah, I can't do it. But they roll their R's and stuff, and they use really weird slang and stuff. If you go to Osaka, then you'll hear more talk like that.
Yeah. People are a little bit more loose-lipped, loose-tongued.
Around Tokyo, people are pretty serious, so
pretty buttoned up.
You're definitely not going to hear it in a city like Kyoto either, because they're
dignified.
Or they think they're dignified at least. But around Osaka, then you'll hear a lot of talk like that, and it's really difficult to understand if you don't hear it a lot. So I don't know what she said exactly, but yeah, they do. He actually is talking about a kappa out of water. Mm-hmm. And that the expression is a kappa out of water or something,
something like that. I don't know the original idiom because of her. I couldn't understand her. It's hard to understand Yankee.
and they go back to it. There's actually another point in the movie where they make another reference about it. Something being out of water or something like that. But kappa, if you don't know, that's referring to the yokai, the creature,
it's
the Japanese folklore
it's an aquatic creature that.
That either drowns people or eats their liver or tries to get their shirikodama, which is their anus butt pearl that houses their houses their soul or something.
Yes.
Japanese folklore is really fun. So
there's butt beads, and that's where your soul is. It's in your butthole.
Shirikodama, just check it out.
If you ever thought Japan was weird, you were right.
You were right.
So at that scene where the idiom is said, we're seeing the aftermath of that, where Kaneda actually sees Kei, who is the revolutionary girl, and I think that this is the first of a few times in the movie that there's some kind of convenient rendezvousing of particular characters,
like in the high school scene, in the scene where they were being interrogated, and then he just like randomly is like, oh look, there's that girl that he saw the picture of in the book that was cute, and he well, she's with us. She's coming with us.
Yeah, and then he sees her again after that terrorist attack where they're, standing there and they'd say the idiom and all that. Then she runs and he sees her and he follows her. And it happens a few times throughout the movie with different characters, not just those two. And I think it kind of undermines the vastness of this incredibly designed city, and it makes it seem really small.
Yeah.
Like, as if you could just keep running into the same people all the time. I don't know. Like, there's a moment later on where the military goes to the Harukiya bar, and they fly over the Harukiya bar, and, you know, that's where Kaneda meets back up. Like, it's a bar. Like, why would they go back there? At that point, the city is fucked. Like,
yeah.
You're not going to go back there. It just
But
doesn't
they
make
do.
sense. It's really, there's some conveniences that kind of bother me, but, you know, that's neither here nor there.
I like Kay, though. I like this character.
I like her too.
I think she's fun. She's definitely a
with-
much needed counter to fucking Cowdy. So
Yeah, Cowdy, I think without Kay in the movie, I think the movie has a real problem with female characters.
yeah.
Because
Kay.
you've got Cowdy, who exists solely, her purpose in the movie is only to get beat up, have her shirt ripped off, and her breasts
Be told to shut up.
Be told to shut up, and have her shirt ripped off, breasts exposed, and then to be crushed to death and killed.
Yeah.
Like
That
she
does
she is
literally nothing else.
Yes, that's all. She serves to be a victim.
Chasing boyfriend, and those things
Yes,
happen.
she serves to be a victim the entire time. And then all of the other girls who are completely nameless, they do nothing but nag. That's
Yeah.
all
Just
they do.
nag, and the boys are always brushing them off. They're leaning on the boys, and the boys don't want them to be around. And
Telling them to shut up all the time and stuff like that. Without Kay, I think this movie has a big problem with female characters, and it's, you know,
and even I
little
mean,
troubling.
Kaneda's like treatment of Kay, like when he first meets her, that first scene where they're walking together and she runs off, he screams at her, "At least tell me." Well, the translation is at least tell me your name, bitch. And just. Now, but the thing is, because she's such a strong character, I mean, she ignores him for most of the movie.
Right.
Like, most of the time when he's talking to her and he's telling her things or whatever, or he's asking dumb questions, she just straight up ignores him and just continues talking. Or just doesn't respond to him and is telling him to do things like be careful and be quiet.
Right. Okay, so we've missed a lot of stuff, and they're talking about the cultist group that believes that AKIRA will come back, right? And they seem like cultists, like religious. It's got like a religious group, and now they're
paint here,
right? They're painting Daikaku Akira. That's what it reads in Japanese. Now, Daikaku likely translates. There's no direct translation, but it likely translates into like Great Enlightenment, which is a very kind of Buddhist religious type thing.
And the guy was sitting there rubbing prayer beads together and things like that. So we're supposed to be getting that kind of imagery.
Exactly. So the individual characters for Daikaku actually are Big and Memory, but like none of my dictionaries that I have, and I have several Japanese English dictionaries, none of them had a translation for it, and the only thing that I could find referencing it was some text about the Buddha. So it's probably like Great Enlightening or something like that, Great Enlightenment. So I don't know.
And then it said below that, of course, Akira.
So yeah, now I want to catch up on the story a little bit because we're running behind, I think. After the terrorist attack, Ryu and Kay arrive at a kitchen where Kay takes a dumbwaiter ahead of Ryu, and Ryu is her revolutionary partner guy. Mm-hmm. And then Kay is then chased through the city's aqueducts by gunfire before Kaneda comes up to help her, and he helps her by attacking the police. And then Kay shoots an officer dead as they escape together. And I actually, the moment that she shoots him, I think is kind of brilliant because you can tell this is the first time she's ever killed someone. You can see it in her face, and it's kind of amazing. It's a really
but
great
she's
moment,
not staggered from it. Like,
no, she's not.
She's staggered for
She
that
reacts.
moment. She reacts as she should, but then after that, she's back to business. And the funny thing is that Kaneda is the one who keeps talking about it. He's the one who's like dogging her heel down the hall, and he's like, I mean, I guess this was the first time you've killed somebody, and I guess, after that, like after you've had some time to like purify your soul, then maybe we can go out for tea or something. And,
yeah, right, exactly.
and she just again is ignoring him.
So after that, as Tetsuo is being tested again, he remembers being left at school by an older man. And then he and Kaneda, it's the flashback that we were talking about before. They play together as children, but Tetsuo soon has a vision of the world and himself crumbling around him, which is imagery that parallels itself throughout the movie. Like we see it, at the beginning, and in the middle, and the end, and in his visions, and then it literally happens at the end of the movie. But I think that something that's interesting is that the melding of the past and the future seems to be kind of a running concept in this film, I think. Often Tetsuo sees visions of both, either separately or together or in one vision. And then eventually when Kaneda's inside the energy field that Akira creates and his consciousness is being blended with Akira, Tetsuo, and the three children, he's actually inside some of the memories that he was not actually part of. And he walks around this facility and sees the kids being tested on and all that kind of stuff that happened years ago.
Well, and even in that scene, that's the scene where Kaneda is floating through and he's seeing all of it, right?
Right.
And he even says at some point, he calls out and he's like, Tetsuo, are these your memories? Because he's confused by seeing other people's memories too. Yep. So
and it's
some
really
of,
like
some of them
some
are.
of them are, and some of them are the kids' memories. But it's a really interesting moment. So after that, this strange-looking girl, number 25, she's the female child of experiment. Number 25, she's monitored by the doctor when the colonel arrives, and then she tells him that she had a dream, and it's the same dream that we just saw Tetsuo have, except she says that after the city crumbles and many people die, they will meet Akira again. She says that they must not let Tetsuo go because of his power, and then she passes out, and the doctor expresses his faith in her precognitive abilities, but then asks the colonel if he will present this to the executive high council, who is kind of politically running the show in this world. Now, the film establishes 25's abilities as scientifically quantifiable so that the audience can believe it as more than just supernatural, I think. And almost everything in the movie is quantifiable within the world of the film. There's nothing supernatural here. It's all measurable, I think. And that's kind of the point of returning to the doctor and the scientists over and over again and having them talk about data and particles and proton collapsing and, all this theoretical physics kind of stuff.
Right.
So I think that threading religion and cultism into this world actually begins to feel a little sloppy and meaningless by the end. And I'm gonna talk about this a little bit later, but I don't really like the inclusion of the religious aspects of this movie. I don't
the cultists who are following Tetsuo toward the end of the movie and all that stuff, and then them dying in vain and everything.
Right, exactly. I don't think it actually says what I want it to say, and I think that this is where we're going to come to a cultural impasse. But I'll explain about that later. I've got notes on it, but I just want to get kind of caught up right now.
Before we're too far, though, I love this moment. This was the second moment in the movie where right now we're in Tetsuo's hospital room, and his toys first got up, the toys that were in the room first got up and started crawling over his bed and were teeny tiny sized, and now they've joined together to make this gigantic evil bear and evil bunny and evil car.
There's so much,
and I love it.
Child and infant symbolism here and in this movie and regarding these kids. And this scene here culminates with Tetsuo cutting his foot on a glass, and it scares the kids off. And my question is: Are the children afraid of blood because it represents mortality? And if revelations later in the movie are to be believed, then these kids were being experimented on alongside Akira 30 years before the events of this film, right?
I love the Lego walls that he collapses into.
Oh, that's cool. So are the kids immortal? Are they kind of?
I don't know. I mean, if they're aging, then I don't feel like they're immortal.
Right, but they still look like kids, and they were being experimented on 30 years ago alongside Akira before the stuff that we saw at the very, very, very beginning of the film with the explosion before World War III or any of that stuff happened. So I think it's interesting because it seems like they might be immortal or something, kind of forever trapped in bodies that are neither young nor old.
Well, I think the fear of blood is probably simpler than that, though. I think it's just that they're still children in so many ways.
Yeah.
That they're still children, and they're afraid of silly things instead of the things that they should be afraid of, which is like their powers and stuff.
I do think that the idea that the children are trapped in bodies that are neither young nor old is possibly, to me, it kind of feels like it's in symbolic support of the idea of past and future conflated,
Yeah. I think so too. I think so. I think it's a visual representation of that. I just love that scene though, and like the milk like pouring out of the creatures, the dolls' faces and stuff, the teddy bear, I mean, and then like being sprayed onto him, and I don't know, it's just it was for moments like that in watching this movie that I did enjoy it and thought that, I mean, it's so creative. Yeah. It's so creative and it's so engaging and it's so
visually
unique,
interesting.
And disturbing and unsettling and all the things that I want to enjoy in a movie like this. But
you expect to see the blood, right? But when it's white and creamy and milky, it's something.
Then something is off and unsettling in that perfect way. And unfortunately for me, there are just these huge, like basically between the scene where his guts spilled out until just now and that scene, I was again in a slump and I was again kind of like, I understand. I'm not really into what's going on. So.
I still enjoy all that stuff in between, like the big psychedelic, moments of hallucinations and stuff like that, where the animation gets really creative
But the guys sitting around, sitting around the table, all the political guys sitting around the table and debating like where their money should go and what they don't have the funding for and all that kind of stuff. I'm not.
Yeah. Well, trying to catch up again, that scene where 25 sees them meeting Akira again in the future, it's where the messianic concepts start to enter the narrative, the idea of a messiah, specifically ideas of the end times destruction accompanying the long-awaited return of a powerful entity of some kind. Mm-hmm. You can say specifically maybe it's Christian imagery, but I think that is a concept that's in many modern religions, that there will be a return of a great power.
Yes, it absolutely is. So
yeah. After that, the colonel and the doctor arrive near the stadium via helicopter. They travel underground, and the colonel recalls a conversation with the doctor about whether or not the children represent the next stage of human evolution, and if all humans will have that power someday, which is pretty important, I think, to the core of the story. The colonel dismisses the notion for its risk. The idea that all humans will have this power is too risky, and the colonel himself is more concerned with saving the city from the social uprising that's happening. So they arrive at their destination underground. The scientists confirm that all conditions are nominal as the colonel approaches the tank where Akira, who is number 28, is kept. He talks about how the people who locked Akira up were afraid of him. Now, I think that the reason they went down to see Akira in the first place is because the doctor believes 25's vision, and they just want to make sure that Akira is still secure,
right?
That he's not just going to pop out, right, and start tearing shit up again. Also, on a very basic level, I think the doctor's and the colonel's differing priorities represent the ideas of progressivism versus conservatism, which is another. I think I talked about this at the beginning, like with this movie's politics, and I think this is where that thread really takes off in an interesting way. Now, interestingly, the movie treats them both fairly equally, kind of demonizing the doctor for his reckless and ultimately dangerous pursuit of knowledge, and the colonel for his illegal suspension of democracy and civil rights, for public security. They're both kind of demonized, which makes this movie kind of politically moderate. And I'm going to talk about that later a little bit more. But I think that this movie is quite middle of the road as far as politics goes. Feeding into that, the fear and rejection of new science is a very old concept that the movie is tapping into, with the suggestion that those who locked away Akira feared his power. I think that goes into the politics, this fear of change, that is kind of, in a way, it's a criticism. It's a critical way to explain what is at the core of a lot of conservative ideas, is a fear of change, or a hesitation to change, or a hesitation to fix what isn't broken, so to speak. So there's that. Then we've got Kay and Kaneda walking through the abandoned building. They meet up with Ryu and another man who's part of the revolutionary group, and they talk about breaking into the facility that they're in right now. Also, I think, don't you think there are like too many men with mustaches in this movie?
There are also too many men in this movie who have like the little scrunched up face, like right in the center of their face, and like the huge forehead and like surrounding cheeks and jowl and everything, but their face, like their eyes and nose and mouth, is all like really small right in the center.
Right.
Like all the important authority figures look like that. It's saying something.
So after that, Ryu, who's a revolutionary, talks to Nezu, who is the mole that's in the council. He discusses taking Kaneda along on this mission to the science facility to try to get more information about Tetsuo, and he mentions that their work will change Neo-Tokyo, and then he points to the group of religious fanatics who you look forward to the awakening of Akira, and they're the ones that were painting the Daikaku Akira on the ground with red paint. Now, my biggest note on this portion is that I think I've come to ultimately dislike the inclusion of the religious group looking forward to Akira's coming, and here's why. This is probably due to my Western mentality. This is the cultural impasse I was talking about. But I think that there are some metaphorical wires being crossed when you make the religious symbolism surrounding Akira literal within the narrative, especially since Akira is the product of science, something that's quantifiable and real, at least in this world. The film ultimately has nothing to say about when religion and scientific progress come up against one another. Which is a concept I would very much like to see explored as someone who was raised in a country where religious groups want to dictate the content of science textbooks. This movie ultimately never has anything to say about what happens at the intersection of faith and science, right? Or religion and progress. There's none of that in here, but both elements exist within the movie.
It's true, they do.
It's very strange to me.
I mean, okay, you're saying it's strange to you, but perhaps the reason why there's nothing to be said about it is because in this country there's nothing said about that. Faith,
right?
Faith in science.
That's what I mean when I'm talking about the cultural impasse. Is that it's something that I see those elements in the movie, and I wonder why they don't. Why they don't create a conflict out of that, because that's so rife for conflict, right?
But I don't think that's the case.
Ripe for conflict
in the East, especially, I say in the East, and I've only lived in Japan, so I can't really speak for other Eastern countries. But as I understand, the mentality is pretty similar, where here at least you can believe in whatever religious things you want to believe in. You can believe in multiple religious things at the same time, and it's totally not uncommon to meet someone who will say that they're Buddhist and also Shinto and also Christian and also atheist and also whatever. Like it doesn't conflict for them. And so at the same time, why would it conflict to add science into that equation? This is a country of people who are perfectly happy practicing the traditions of, Buddhist and Shinto ceremonies and things like that, but at the same time being completely scientific in their beliefs when it comes to those things, even when it conflicts with the messages, that doesn't matter to them. So, and of course I'm generalizing and of course that's not for everyone, but as a whole, it happens a lot. So probably that would be my guess why they don't address it in this movie, is because in Japan they don't address it. It's not something to be addressed.
Yeah. So after that scene, after the scene where Nezu meets with Ryu, the revolutionary, the council discusses the rising terrorist activities and other problems in the city, and the councilmen seem to be pretty unanimously against the colonel's request for more money to follow up on number 25's premonition. They are incredulous about whether or not Akira was the cause of World War III, which is just kind of thrown out there. And then the colonel leaves kind of incensed, right? In that scene, Nezu, the mole character, he exists only in the background. And if you don't notice him, I think that you'd be pretty lost concerning his significance to the story. And I only say that because I didn't notice him in the scene for years.
Yeah, I didn't. I don't know what you're talking about.
I kind of had no idea who he was and what he had to do with the revolutionaries. And from that, I feel like the last three scenes that I just talked about are all out of order. Okay, and check this out. I feel like the council should meet first. As far as what the movie shows, the council should meet first, where the colonel can mention 25's premonition, his need for money, and perhaps Tetsuo. And we see Nezu in that scene. He needs to be featured prominently. From there, Nezu takes the information about Tetsuo to Ryu, where he also maybe gives him the key cards that they use to get into the facility. And then Ryu speaks with the revolutionaries about the mission. And then, the scenes are technically where they're supposed to be based on, bits of information spoken by characters who wouldn't know the information otherwise.
Right.
But it's pretty kind of superficial. However, I think the way I just said it, would clear up any confusion about who Nezu is and how the revolutionaries operate.
I mean, I was confused by it, and by the end of the movie, when we had some pretty significant deaths and stuff happen, I was surprised that characters were together when I didn't think that they were related in any way. So yeah, that would have cleared up some confusion for me. I do love this setting here.
Yeah.
I love the baby's room, they called it.
Right.
Where the children are being kept. I think it's really cool.
It is. It's really cool.
And again, this weird imagery where we've got children's stuff juxtaposed against like violence and really graphic gore and things like that.
Yeah. Which is, of course, I think intentional. I think that's the idea.
Of course it is, and it's great.
You take this idea of childhood, and I think that's another idea.
Childhood and innocence.
Childhood and innocence, and how that was, taken from these kids. I think that is what the movie's going for with having them being children with old faces, is that these are children who have had their childhoods, literally their youth. It's their youth itself, literally taken from them by science,
right?
By scientific experimentation.
I love Kaneda driving this, whatever it is, this hovercraft thing. I love him driving it because I believe he could drive it.
Right.
Because the moment he gets into it and he's like, oh, where's this thing? It's got to have this thing. Does it have this thing? Oh, it's got this thing.
Well, that's interesting because the way he gets this thing, the way he gets the hovercraft, he does it by knocking the guard off of his hovercraft, the guard who was driving it, he knocks him off of it, and it mirrors imagery from earlier in the movie when he does the same thing to a clown
on a bike
and knocks him off of his bike. We already know what Kaneda is capable of and willing to do.
Right.
So we see him do these things over and over again because it's believable within his character. We've seen him do it in a more grounded context, so when a hovercraft shows up and he does the same thing, it's fine. Right?
And I totally bought it, and I'm just like, yeah, it's a different machine. He's never seen it before. He's never ridden on it before. I mean, he even was like, what is that thing? Like, he clearly had never seen it before.
Right.
But I totally believe that he can drive it. I totally believe he can figure it out and drive it because I've seen him figuring out other things like that, and he clearly has. I mean, he's going to school for it too, right?
Yeah, it seems so.
He clearly has a knowledge of that stuff, and I like it when a story does that, when they do something and I believe it, and I have good examples to believe it, like for believing it.
There's so many amazing visual things in this movie too. Like, I love how Tetsuo's power manifests itself in the real world by like you see it in spheres a lot. Mm-hmm. Like, what he'll do is he'll use his power and
which mimics the big sphere at the end.
Exactly. See, and that's, to me, I think spheres themselves are a recurring motif, likely because of their cosmic connotations, right? And the ending makes this more relevant. But I think that all of this stuff, the concept of a sphere, the idea of a sphere, we connect that image with the idea of celestial bodies, planets and stars and things that float in space and in our universe. And then at the end of the movie, when Akira literally creates a new universe for Tetsuo to, inhabit, the last images of the movie that we see are what one may interpret as like a Big Bang or something like that maybe Tetsuo has created a Big Bang, or Akira has created a Big Bang and created a new universe for, these humans that have gone beyond human, can live safely away from other humans that aren't ready for that power. Right. So I think that's almost definitely where that imagery comes from. But yeah, spheres as a motif. It's totally all over this movie, I think. Before this, we had, the Kaneda and the crew. They've broken into this facility, and of course, shit has already gone down, and Tetsuo's gone. But they were led through the tunnels by a guide, and they were spotted by a guard on a hovercraft. And then their guide was killed. The guard calls for backup, and then crashes. And another guard arrives. Kaneda wrestles him off the bike, like we talked about. and then they go deeper into the facility with Kay.
And at that point, Kay is getting guidance from Kyoko. Is that her name?
Yes,
little
Kyoko
girl?
begins speaking through Kay, which is important because Kay actually, it's insinuated that Kay might be the most important person at the very end of the movie. Like, she becomes the most important person to the world at the end of the movie. And she represents this kind of progress in moderation, politically moderate thing that is going on in this movie that I think is kind of weird, but that's just me. As someone, and, not to bury the lead or anything or to mince words or whatnot, but I'm very, very liberally minded, very much so. So the way this movie kind of plays with the idea of scientific progress is something that, wagging your finger at the audience and saying, you better be careful about what you do, because if you play God, then you might fuck some shit up.
Then you might make something that then makes another universe and then has a really ambiguous ending as to what happens to that other universe.
But in defense of, political moderation or moderateness or whatever, the colonel is also kind of demonized for what he does when he shuts down, freedom of the press. And all that kind of
true.
Stuff.
And this scene right here, I want to make mention of the colonel right now, because he's doing something that I think we can flash back. You already did mention Gladiator, right?
I did
earlier. So see here right now, the colonel has been. It's been ordered to arrest him, I guess, by that council of those people.
The High Executive Council.
Of political people, the government,
right.
I assume.
They are taking over the military actions.
Yes, they are trying to take over the military. And what we see happen here is what should have happened in Gladiator, which is that someone in charge of a military group who is trusted by his men and who, for whatever reason, is turned against by some other higher figure, political or not, which in Gladiator's case would be the emperor, the new emperor. But the soldiers, who do they follow when they're told to arrest their military leader? They follow their military leader, and they shoot the other dude.
Exactly.
And then they proceed to go and arrest
Ridley Scott
the people in the council.
Yeah, Ridley Scott should have taken some notes from old AKIRA.
They're still loyal to the military leader, whereas in Gladiator, his whole family is slaughtered, and his own men, try to hunt him down, and it's just in that movie repeatedly. They're telling us that Maximus's great skill is gaining the loyalty of the men that follow him.
Right.
But we don't even see that with this colonel.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even have to tell us anything about this colonel.
It's obvious.
Demands loyalty from his people and whatever. It just is there. Anyways,
we didn't talk about it at all, but the sequence in the hallway that's very, very famous, where Tetsuo comes out and he destroys all the guards in the hallway on the way to the baby room. That scene in the hallway, it's rightfully some of the most memorable and influential in the entire movie, being the inspiration for sequences in films such as The Raid 2 and Attack the Block. You saw Attack the Block, right?
Yeah, I loved Attack the Block.
Yeah, Attack the Block has a lot of sequences in the hallway that feel so much like Akira, feels so much like that scene in Akira. And of course, Akira has been very, very influential in other ways. It influenced, anime for years after this. Even as recently as a movie like Chronicle, the whole ending of Chronicle feels like a live-action Akira movie. It's kind of amazing. I really highly recommend that movie, actually. If you haven't seen Chronicle, check that out. It's really cool. But yeah, did you know that this was the first, as far as I know, as far as the internet says, it's widely regarded to be the first anime film that was shown in American theaters.
For real?
Yep.
No, I did not know that.
And is kind of responsible for,
bringing anime to America.
Kind of the big boom of anime fandom in the 90s and the early 90s until things like, Dragon Ball showed up.
Well, and of course there was stuff before that. There was Astro Boy and there was stuff like that.
Well, before that, yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. It's not that anime didn't have a presence in the United States. There was always things like, Star Blazers and Astro Boy and Speed Racer and Robotech and stuff like that.
I mean, it had a presence before, but you're saying that in theaters, though.
Right.
that
As a
this movie
film. Yeah,
came
exactly.
So really important trivia that I know you were dying to learn about.
Oh, let's hear it.
So in the bar that they frequent before the Tetsuo apparently killed the guy, we don't see him kill him, but we can presume. We got a brief view of the menu, and if you want to know what's on the menu, then I'll tell you.
Please enlighten me.
There was atarame, which is dried salted squid, usually in strips. It's often eaten
bar
as
food?
It's bar food. Kind of like Japanese beef jerky.
Yeah, it is.
Sorta,
It's
right?
really good. It's good with beer.
But they eat beef jerky too. So these days, wafu steak, which is like
Wafu. Anything wafu is Japanese style.
Yeah.
So it's steak cooked with like a Japanese style sauce. It's probably got like
daikon or something on
yeah,
radish,
like grated
scraped on top.
radish, soy sauce, meating, stuff like that. Yeah.
Let's see what else was on there. Asare shumushi,
Maybe.
which is a type of clam.
Oh yes, that's right.
And then we maybe it was
Shimushi. Yeah, it's cooked in wine, or it's cooked in
Shimushi?
sake. Yeah, it's
cooked in sake. And then ume tataki, which is gonna be umeboshi, which is plum. And tataki is like a style of preparation where it could be a couple things, but I'm guessing that it would be that the plum was cut up into little bits and then mixed with other things.
Yeah, probably.
So if you want to know what's on the menu at the bar, now you know.
There you go. if you ever really cared about that kind of thing. Something I wanted to talk about in the baby room sequence, 25, I believe, says to Tetsuo, as he's using his powers and destroying things, big people like you shouldn't use your powers like that. Do you remember that?
Yes.
I think there's an attempt here to conflate the socially responsible use of science and the innocence of childhood, I think. But the metaphor to me never really finds its legs despite recurring motifs and Tetsuo literally turning into a giant baby during the climax of this movie, right?
Right.
Most of the stuff just reinforces Tetsuo Kaneda and the test children's loss of childhood due to abandonment or scientific experimentation. And in the case of the test children, it appears as though the defining characteristic of childhood, which would be youth, like I said before, has been quite literally taken from them as they all bear the visage of old age. So, like I said, I don't think that message, that the conflation of childhood innocence and responsible scientific progress or the responsible use of science really goes anywhere, but I think the movie tries. And I feel like I keep saying that. There's so much in this movie where it's like it tries to say something, but it never really finds its grounding. It never really finds its legs as far as like metaphor and theme and stuff like that. Like I said before, where this movie shines, world building, visuals,
Yeah.
world building and visuals. The characters are fine. Music, the music is wonderful.
Is great.
The music is wonderful. It's a really great piece of entertainment art. I think it's a really, really great piece of entertainment art. But it's,
My problem with this kind of stuff.
I don't think it really has a solid foundation of ideology.
And it's a movie that wants to have a solid foundation of ideology.
It does, very much so.
It's a movie that is all about telling you about something important and wants to sound serious and wants to sound important and wants to throw a whole lot of technobabble in your face so that you believe the science.
That's one of the things that I do when I try to approach a film critically and I try to understand a film critically and pick it apart and analyze it and understand what is most important to the filmmaker. The way I do that is by watching and listening and trying to find what the goals of the movie are.
Right.
And once it's clear what the goals of the movie are just by watching it, then you can just watch the film and find out for yourself whether or not it met those goals. And I think that's
because any good piece of
from a critical standpoint, any piece of art like this, especially narrative art, is going to present its goals, or it should present its goals to you, and then try to achieve those goals.
Right, and not just goals, but your themes. What are you saying? What are you trying to say? What statements are you making? Because if you're
actually, I think ultimately what this movie is saying is actually kind of strong and grounded. I just don't like it. I just don't like what it's saying.
What do you think it's ultimately saying?
I think that the movie is arguing for responsible use of science and progress
As compared to irresponsible use? But what's the problem with that?
Okay, I don't want to be the guy that makes everything about fucking World War II, because it's not all about World War II.
No, but I mean, we did open this movie with a bomb being dropped on Tokyo.
So we think. It's very, very much A-bomb imagery. No doubt about that. But I think it's a bad way to start this month of anime films, and I think it's a bad way to approach most Japanese media, is to just assume that so many things are about, Hiroshima or Nagasaki or whatever. And I don't want to be that guy, but I think that with the imagery in this film, it's pretty safe to say that the message of this movie, the theme of this movie, is coming from a place of, look what science did to us once, right?
True.
Look what the abuse of science did to us.
But the thing is, though, is that this is a country where that is constantly called into question. I mean, and it's not just called into question because of things in the past. It's called into question because of things in the present. Fukushima.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
Look
absolutely.
what science did to Fukushima.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Right? And again, this is a huge debate here that is constantly, in controversy. And from the outside, from the West, I'm sure it's easy to look at it and just be like, nuclear power is bad, right? But for a country like Japan, it's something that still has to be debated and still has to be discussed again and again and again, because the electricity is so expensive here. It's so expensive here that we don't have a dryer.
Right.
We don't have a dryer because the cost of running a dryer in your house is outrageous. I mean, the heating and stuff, you use gas heaters in the winter. We don't have central heat and air in our house. Electricity is incredibly expensive in this country, and so topics like that, topics like scientific progress and at the cost of human lives and at the cost of the consequences and stuff, is something that is ongoing, and it's not just World War II.
No, you're right. No, I mean, I agree with that, and I think that obviously responsible use of science is paramount to, achieving true progress or seeing true progress in society. But I think that the way this movie approaches it is by being kind of politically moderate, by taking characters who represent certain ideologies in the political spectrum and demonizing them equally. And it's specifically definitely not through lifting those ideologies up on a pedestal, but definitely by knocking them down a few pegs. Mm-hmm. And that's how this movie approaches that. That's how this movie approaches its politics, is it says, okay, here's the science, here's the progress, here's the left, and they're fucking up all over the place. They're just irresponsible as all hell, and they're letting the shit go crazy, and basically, the world is going to suffer for it. There's going to be lives lost, and there's going to be, damage, possibly irreparable damage done to the city and to people and to lives everywhere. And then on the other side, you've got this military presence, and you've got, politics, and you've got these, specifically the military, I think, and this regression of progress, or this oppression of progress, which very much feels like conservatism to me. And those people are equally demonized. The colonel is demonized for what he does. We wouldn't see that shot of the Kaori watching television where the helicopter says, "We've been forced to land. We are being commanded to land. Freedom of the press has been shut down." Right. We wouldn't see that unless the movie wanted us to know that this is what's happening. This is what the military is doing. Yeah. Right?
The military is doing these things that are negative, that are bad.
Right. And at the very core of conservatism is this idea of preservation. It's of maintaining the status quo. It's of, like I said before, if it's not broke, don't fix it. That's one of those ideas. And one of the things that suffers within that ideology is progress. If that's how you're approaching things, if that's your state of thought, then progress kind of takes a back burner. I believe, in my opinion. And when when the colonel is asked questions along the lines of what do you think about human advancement in the next step of human evolution, which is code for scientific progress or societal progress,
Right.
in any form, he's like, I don't care about any of that. It sounds dangerous. All I want to do is preserve what we have. I want to make sure that we're fine the way we are. And it's, I don't know. I don't care for how the movie approaches it by taking everyone down a peg instead of exploring things in more interesting ways, I guess.
Okay.
So that's where I'm coming from, I guess.
This was the scene where I got confused.
What did you get confused about?
I hadn't even realized. I mean, not this scene. It was actually before this scene. I hadn't even realized that they were associated. Maybe I was.
Well, they did share a scene together before.
Was it when they were walking
Yeah,
down and then like
down the steps and they see the
cultists were
Yes,
down there?
Yes.
And I guess at that moment I didn't know either of those characters well enough to be paying attention to who they were talking to specifically, and we just had that brief moment. What's up with his death here?
I think he's having a heart attack.
He has a heart attack.
I think he has a heart attack, and that's old Nezu.
He poured so many. He did not pour that many pills in his mouth. It looks like he's suffocated on pills.
It's really funny. Nezu's a funny character to me because he is referred to in the very first scene that the colonel shares with one of the council members, and the council member is saying, "Are you going to, tell the council that there's a mole? You think there's a mole, and you think that's why the 26 at the very beginning of the movie was able to escape with one of the revolutionaries. Are you going to tell the council there's a mole? Are you going to upset him that way? Because it could seem like you're just skirting responsibility by trying to put blame on somebody else that no one knows who it is. There's a mole, right? Now think of the word mole. A mole in English being a rodent.
Yeah,
right?
And Nezu, I think of Nezumi.
Right, and Nezu, it sounds like Nezumi, which is the Japanese word for mouse. Also, his appearance, he looks like a mouse with the two front teeth. He looks like a rodent. In the movie, it's so strange that that's how it shook out in the translation, because in the movie there's no Japanese word for mole that has anything to do with rodents. Right. The word they use is I forget what the word is exactly, but they use betrayer. It's something sha, but it's traitor or betrayer. I think that's kind of funny.
Cool. It's interesting.
So let's talk about character a little bit. Like, for example, the fact that this character, Kaneda, took the time to change clothes. With all this shit going
Cody
on.
apparently only owns one set of clothing, even after it gets ripped off of her.
All right, let's talk about wardrobe first. Let's talk about costumes. All right, I understand completely that if you're watching a cartoon and you're watching it serialized, and every single week you come back and you see the same characters, they're wearing the same...
looks like he's about to go Super Saiyan here.
Right. Well, actually, I have a note about that. They wear the same costumes every week. That's fine. When you're watching a film that takes place ostensibly in the real world, the fact that characters never actually change clothes across long periods of time is kind of noticeable to me. And it's especially noticeable, you mentioned with Kaori. She gets her shirt ripped off. She's wearing this little like loose white top with these colorful, shorts. And she gets her top ripped off. And the next time we see her, she's wearing that top again.
She just had the same one.
Right, exactly. Like she's got the same one.
That's cool. Every time, they get ripped off her a lot, right? So
all the
hanging out with these guys, they're always ripping her shirt off her. All the gang members
wear all the same things all the time. And Kaneda just changed back into his, iconic red jumpsuit or red suit that's got the pill jacket and everything. I think the only one whose costume actually changes, or his wardrobe actually changes consistently throughout the movie, is Tetsuo, and that's only because he's constantly in different situations.
This moment here, as the bridge is collapsing, kind of got me because that first collapse started, and then we saw a piece of the bridge that hadn't yet collapsed, and people were like jumping for it, and other people were grabbing them and pulling them up, and we saw a few people get saved, and then that part of the bridge collapses too, and it was just that this movie, the pacing of some of the action scenes, the deliberate, like, slow pacing of some of these moments like this, some of these graphic moments is, I don't know, it just has this really unique feel. It just
definitely
hits me the right way.
Yeah. It's impactful. It has gravitas, So I want to talk about the characters just a little bit. I really only have one big note about this. I like the characters of Tetsuo and Kaneda. I do like them as characters, like the
throughout
way
the movie,
they're built.
I came to enjoy Kaneda more than I did at the beginning of the movie. So
My biggest complaint, though, I really wish there was more to their relationship than Tetsuo constantly feeling like he's standing in Kaneda's shadow, because there's like nothing else. There's nothing else to their relationship, and they keep beating you over the head.
Yeah, just again and again and
exactly.
again.
They beat you over the head with it. You know, I don't think that the core of what makes them friends gets enough breathing room. You don't really understand why they're friends, except for maybe they have
because all you feel is
unhealthy connection with
resentment.
one. Yeah, exactly.
All you feel is just resentment from Tetsuo.
And you know, I think that you know, development of characters, that breathing room, I think that's sort of a broader problem for all the characters in the film, and that none of them really feel quite complete, save for maybe like the Colonel, of whom we get, I think, a fairly comprehensive understanding of his motivations, you know, politically and personally, along with his relationships to characters around him, particularly the children. So we get to see him act in all these different situations. I think the Colonel is really the most complete character in this entire film.
I could agree with that.
He's obviously close to the kids. He obviously loves the kids and wants to take care of them. So he's got personal motivations. He's also got political motivations, and he's got, you know, loyalties and things like that. I think to me, he's the most interesting character in the entire movie, just because he's the most complete.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Did you have a favorite character?
A favorite character, Kay.
You like Kay? Yeah, she's a good character.
Kay.
She's nice and strong.
She's a good character. The reason why I like Kay, I'm not just like diving towards, you know, the strong female character, and it's not really because of that. The reason is because if it weren't for her in this movie, then I would probably have a pretty sour taste in my mouth about the way that women are represented in this movie. So
I do want to, speaking of Kay,
definitely.
Speaking of Kay, the scene where Kay and Kaneda are in jail together, that's a really important scene, and I think we need to talk about it in order to understand the ending of
where
the movie.
She starts talking about evolution and all that kind of stuff, and ignores everything he says, all his dumb comments.
Right, exactly. She refers to Akira as absolute energy. Right? She uses evolution and the laws of, specifically, I think, she doesn't say it outright, but I think she uses the laws of conservation of matter and energy to explain that everything in the universe comes from the same basic material, but power is divided appropriately among all living things, I guess. She then posits that what if by some mistake, the example she uses, what if an amoeba was given the power of a human? Now, an amoeba, what it does, how she explains it, is an amoeba just eats everything around it. That's all it does. It exists only to eat. What if it was given the power of a human, but still acted as an amoeba? It would be very destructive indeed, right? So she ties this back to Tetsuo and Akira, saying that the government has been trying to control this kind of power in humans for a long time, and that's what led to the fall of Tokyo, 30 years ago. Now, 25, we learn, is speaking through Kay and delivering this exposition to Kaneda, through Kay, and then their cell door unlocks and they leave, and the scene ends. But from a spiritual context, maybe a religious context, let's say spiritual. From a spiritual context, I suppose Kay's explanation insinuates that, air quotes, God, quote unquote, is a biological entity, maybe, and by some mistake, this higher being's power was given to Akira, through science or whatever. Humans bestowed this kind of power onto Akira. And this is probably the moment when the film, I think, starts pulling together what I think is the strongest and most coherent message, which is one of a politically moderate view of science and progress. I think that's when it really starts to take off in that scene. But yeah, I don't know. That's going to be important, I think, to understanding the end of the movie and understanding this idea of absolute energy and having power that we don't understand or can't control yet because it's too soon for us or whatever. Like progress and moderation. Let's slow it down.
What's the point of having World War II or World War III being a part of this movie if the whole thing at the beginning in Tokyo and stuff was just supposed to be Akira?
Well, I think that that's a good question, and I think it insinuates that the world responded to it as though it was an atom bomb, as though it was a nuclear weapon going off in Tokyo, and countries responded accordingly to such, an act. And
but
fighting.
did it say that was the start of of World War III?
It did not say that. The only thing in the movie that insinuates that started World War III is the politician who suggested that maybe AKIRA wasn't the cause of World War III. That's the only thing we get.
But it says 2019 was 31 years after World War III.
Right. 1988. Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, 1988 is when World War III started, I think. Or began? Ended? I don't know.
Well, that's...
I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly how long World War III was supposed to take place in this world.
But I mean, it just but it says after World War III. It says after World War III, which would make me think that was 31 years like since it had ended, and would make me think that the explosion in Tokyo was the end of the war, because 88 is exactly 31 years from 2019. So.
Oh, okay.
So it would make me think. I mean, after makes me think that the war had ended, not started.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know.
Then what's the point? My point is, what's the point of having even introducing the concept of World War III if
maybe that's I haven't read the manga, and that's probably going to get me a lot of shit. Especially
you
like
own
with my
it.
criticism.
I can see it.
I do.
You own it all in Japanese.
I do. It's over 2,000 pages of all Japanese, and I can get through it, but it would take me so long. My Japanese reading is not that fast. It would feel like homework. That's what it would feel like.
You should go do it. Go do your homework.
Oh my god. Anyway. So we are getting close. Well, I say close to the end of the movie. We still got about a half hour on this thing. But yeah, the whole climax of this movie feels like it feels like it's like a 45-minute climax. Like shit just as soon as Tetsuo breaks out and starts wreaking havoc in the city. Like it really starts even before that. Like as soon as he breaks out of the hospital, it's just non-stop action. Like it just keeps going and going and going and builds and builds and builds until this huge like cosmic climax at the very end. It's very anime.
There are some moments here, especially with the, and it's not just in this scene, it's in other scenes, but like right here, like look at the size of those jars that contain AKIRA. And then in other scenes where we've seen the jars, they look very, very small. And in that scene, they look huge. And I mean, because he's standing when we get like an above shot and we see where he's standing, like it's not because of the placement of the jars that they look so gigantic. This was clearly intentional. And they do that a lot in this movie where they play with size. See, he's standing right next to them. Yeah. He's standing right next to them, but in this shot, it looks like they're so much bigger.
Probably a mistake.
Oh, you think it's a mistake?
Probably a mistake. Just, I mean, usually when I think of
I was given more credit than I should have then.
Yeah, well, when I think of mistakes in animation and stuff like that, I usually think of things along the lines of like character models and stuff like that. When characters go off model and get kind of
funky for a little while.
Yeah, it's like, oh, what? Why is that eye floating up on your forehead there? That would be a bad case, but nevertheless, I think.
But this movie does that a few times, though.
Too. Yeah. You think they go off model in this a little bit?
I was talking about the size of things.
Oh, you think the background cells? The background cells are kind of wonky sometimes.
Just that objects. Sometimes, like the size of an object will change. There was also a scene, the moment in the bar when they were in the bar and Tetsuo was sitting up on top of the whatever locker or whatever it was, and he's holding the bag of pills. And when we would have a close-up of him in the bag of pills was distinctly a different color than his jacket. But then, like, when there would be far-away scenes, it's like they forgot to color in the bag of pills, and it was just the same color as his shirt.
Right.
And there were just a lot of things like that I noticed while I was watching this. I guess it's been a while since I've watched an older anime, so that's probably what I'm noting here is just this was a while ago when it was made.
I had another note here about a parallel being drawn between knowledge and power, and I think power is, I talked about this before, I think power is a main theme of the movie, the concept, or it's a concept that the movie plays with. And there's a parallel drawn between knowledge and power, specifically scientific knowledge and power. And I think the movie believes that a taste of either knowledge or power only breeds a thirst for more of the same. And I think that and the movie at least, thinks that they can be equally as dangerous. And this ties back to the film's ultimately moderate take on progress, scientific progress, that is. But yeah, you can see that in how, like, one of the main conceits of the movie and how the psychic powers and stuff work is that that everyone has psychic powers, laying dormant inside them.
Yeah, they say that a few times.
But they're only awoken when you come in contact with another psychic's powers. So at the beginning of the movie, when Tetsuo encounters 25 on the highway, that's when his powers wake up. And then Kei, who is insinuated to be someone very important, actually, it's not 25, 26. He encounters 26 on the highway. And when 25 starts talking through Kei, Kyoko, that's the child's real name. She starts talking through Kei. Kei comes in contact with her power, and then her, dormant psychic ability starts waking up, right?
But I felt like they were controlling her, though.
You think so?
That's what I thought.
Well, I mean,
I thought they were entirely controlling her.
No, I think they are too. I think they're entirely controlling her, but because
she's able to do those things because of her dormant
power.
And
it will be confirmed later on when she calls to Kaneda inside the energy sphere, because she calls to him psychically.
Yeah, that's right.
So, which then means maybe Kaneda has his power woken up because she contacted him psychically, maybe.
Well, I mean, but we can't presume that everyone who comes in contact with these powers, their power is woken up. We can't presume that, because how many people died or were injured? Not died, because that wouldn't help the theory, but were injured because of these powers and then don't do anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I found my note about the Japanese word for betrayer or traitor is naitsusha. That's the word they use. Has nothing to do with rodents or moles or anything. Okay, let's talk about the color red, because that's important too, and I mentioned this earlier.
There's a lot of red in this movie.
There's a lot of red in this movie. As far as I can guess, the purpose of the red cape...
There's red right now in this movie.
Yes, there's red in just almost every frame. As far as I can guess, the purpose of the red cape is to symbolically link Tetsuo to Kaneda.
Superman. Oh, sorry.
Well, there's that too.
Sorry.
Clark Kent, right? Bringing it back. We're bringing it back from Shakespeare in Love. How about that? So I think it's to symbolically link Tetsuo and Kaneda. Kaneda has a red motif, obviously, and he is the image of power to Tetsuo. He represents power. He is the most, Tetsuo's most senior, right?
Yeah.
I guess, in the gang and in their lives, and they beat you over the head with it. You know it, right? It's obvious. Tetsuo is trying to emulate this kind of power. Of course, the title AKIRA is in giant red block letters, and the AKIRA cultists use red paint to write his name all over the city. And then there's another moment where this might be relevant, where Tetsuo cuts his foot on the glass, and the red blood scares the children, right? And perhaps it's not the blood the children fear, but the power, which would explain why none of them grew and used their powers on the irresponsible or destructive level that AKIRA and Tetsuo do. And we just saw a moment where Tetsuo just flew into space to destroy this satellite cannon, the soul cannon that, tore off his arm, that he just rebuilt with metal scraps, which could be a reference to his name. His name is Tetsuo, which you can spell Tetsuo with the kanji for iron and man. Iron Man.
Well, and that's a thing too, right?
Yeah. Actually, there's a whole series of movies by a filmmaker named Shinya Tsukamoto called Tetsuo the Iron Man.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's interesting. He went into space and destroyed the soul cannon, and while he was in space, did you see his aura? His aura was totally red. He had a red aura coming off of him. Like a Dragon Ball Z character.
Yeah, I was
kind of looks like Vegeta.
He's got the forehead thing going on.
And when Kei is fighting him, when 25 has taken over Kei's mind, and she's like floating through the air and teleporting and all that shit, and like fighting Tetsuo, it looks like a DBZ battle.
It sure does.
It really does.
And his hair's all pointy up in the air. We just need to change that color a little bit, and we got ourselves a Super Saiyan.
It's definitely over 9,000.
Definitely.
There's another thing I want to talk about. According to the Bible, the Holy Bible. The Antichrist will declare himself God, and many will believe him.
Why are we talking about the Bible?
Because I think that it's relevant.
Okay.
So the Antichrist will declare himself God, and many will believe him. However, true believers will see through his lies. And this is where the movie starts establishing Tetsuo as the Antichrist to Akira's Christ. When Tetsuo is going through the city, there are people saying, "Oh, it's Akira. Akira's returned." And then there's one guy that stands up and he's like, "Don't be deceived." And
but
shit like that.
I don't know. It's really hard for me to read Christian symbolism into a Japanese film. That's hard for me.
I know.
Why?
It's all,
why?
it's all over stuff like Evangelion. Evangelion has a ton of religious symbolism.
But generally when
it's usually fashionable. It's usually like set dressing.
That's what I'm talking about. Is generally when you see Christian symbolism and stuff in anime, it's because like they want to do a vampire show and show a bunch of girls wearing crosses and stuff and like nun clothes and things like that. Like it's usually just fashionable. Just like Christianity is fashionable here. That's what it is. It's completely superfluous. Like it's in Japan, Western weddings, like Christian weddings, are fashionable. They still do a regular wedding. They still do a Shinto wedding.
Right. They still do a regular Shinto wedding, but they think that Christian weddings are cute.
Right. And so they also buy, or rent, I should say, for the same cost of buying a dress in the States. They rent a American-style white wedding dress, and they have an American-style ceremony where they hire some random white guy who's definitely not ordained to conduct a wedding for them in English, which them and their guests do not understand because it's fashionable. So, I mean, there are chapels all over the place. When you see a chapel in Japan, do not be confused. That is not a place of worship.
It is not a place of worship.
That is a place of photos.
Yes.
And there
are entire companies that make money off of renting out foreigners dressed up as priests.
Yes, you've been offered a job before.
I've been offered a job at a company that what they do is they dress you up like a priest and you go officiate at a Japanese wedding, but it's, of course,
and I know a few
Western
people
style.
who do it. It's good money.
It is. You can make pretty good money. You have to work all weekends, but because that's just how it goes.
And they're just as interested in your background as a religious, overseer as they are as your background in theater.
You don't even have to speak Japanese because they want the authentic experience. You have to do the whole thing in English.
You can just say whatever you want.
I mean, if you want it to be really authentic, you should have to do it in Latin, but let's not go there.
Well,
you do the whole thing in English, and no one in that room understands a word you're saying. You could say you could recite the beginning of Let's Go Crazy from Prince.
I mean, that's
Dearly
what you
beloved,
would do,
we are gathered
right?
here today to
You've
get through this thing
talked
called
about it.
life. Oh, I mean, if I got that job,
that's what you do.
100%.
Definitely.
Every time.
But I mean, it's just a fashionable thing. So when I see like outward, like obvious Christian symbolism in anime, I know that's why, is because it's fashionable. But when I hear people like you are right now reading Christian symbolism into an anime, it's really hard for me to buy it. I mean, because I don't think that's where they were going with it.
No, you don't buy it as meaningful. I think that Otomo knew exactly what he was doing with the imagery in this movie.
Okay.
And I think the concept, like especially because they use the religious cultists and stuff. Like I don't like the fact that the religious group is in the movie because it doesn't actually work with the main themes that the movie's working with, and they don't come at that intersection that I really want them to come to, which I talked about earlier. But I think that including, the religious aspects and the spiritual aspects and all of this talk of God and all this kind of stuff, I think it's really clear that the movie wants to draw some kind of parallel with, human power and scientific power and, supernatural or spiritual godlike power,
Yeah.
I think it's there. And I think,
I get that. I guess just like yeah. And I mean, it's not that I can't read into it too. Like when I hear someone saying he's not the real one, don't follow him. Yeah, it is like, it's a messianic message going on there where, it's not really Jesus, or some people think it is really Jesus, and right, like I get it and I can see it. I just
We totally missed. This was so long ago. We cannot keep up with this movie.
No,
it's
well,
impossible.
I mean, if you tried to keep up with all the information that you would need to spew out of your mouth to say what was happening in this movie, then you would just be doing that the whole
I just want to say that
so.
when in the scene where Tetsuo goes into the underground facility to find and bring up the containment unit that holds Akira, there's a shot of a door opening, like a sealed door. That was our hint. That was our hint for this week. And 2 people got it. Ryborg009, you can find him at rbrogan27 on Twitter, and Matthew Garrison on Facebook. And neither one of them have anything to plug. But Matthew Garrison wanted to thank us for a great show.
Oh, cool.
Well, you're welcome.
Thank
you for listening. Yeah. All right, so right now we're seeing some really gross stuff going on.
Thank you for listening to us get off topic
Yes.
for this whole episode.
And right now we're seeing Tetsuo grow into a giant, fleshy, pulsating...
I mean, it's awesome. It's just, I mean, this is the most beautiful thing. Are those his testicles
I think
down
those
there?
Yes, those are testicles.
Uh-huh. Yeah, this is the best part of the movie right here.
Oh, yeah, when he transforms into this giant, gross baby.
What's up with Japan and giant babies? I mean, that's a thing.
He looks like the Kewpie baby.
Well, I was thinking
know
more...
Kewpie, the
yes,
Kewpie
yeah,
mayonnaise?
of course, I know. I live here, and I eat mayonnaise regularly.
Oh, I get it. Okay, so the white substance that they said was milk is actually mayonnaise, and he's the Kewpie baby. That's the central theme.
I got it.
Mayonnaise is the answer. And that's what they're saying about the scientific progress, is that if you don't, mediate or moderate, you don't
moderate your mayonnaise consumption?
Yes. If you don't do that, then you will have a godless, hedonistic Neo-Tokyo society where people feel each other's boobs in public.
Mm-hmm. True, and nobody wants that.
And God forbid that happens.
Oh, and there she gets crushed.
And that is her character arc. That is the end of Kaori's character arc, is being abused, being beaten, being victimized in all these sorts of ways. Sexually victimized, physically victimized, abused physically. And then,
mentally victimized too. I mean, like I said, he does tell her to shut up.
Abuse, yeah. If you have verbal abuse, and then she's crushed to death in her boyfriend's giant, fleshy, pulsating baby body.
Yeah, big babies are a thing though, right? Like Spirited
Japanese
Away.
cartoons, everybody.
Spirited Away and the Big Baby.
Yeah, that's right. Right. It is super creepy.
It's a thing.
It is.
Well, and I mean, like sometimes in religious imagery too, you get like this, like, I don't know, giant children thing going on.
Like Honey, We Blew Up the Kid.
Well, and sometimes like the Buddha even can look like when in some representations too, when like the bald image and stuff,
can
and the
look
really
like
fat
an infant. It's got like an infant kind of thing going. All right, yeah, weird. So the doctor is looking at the wave pattern right now and looking at this, Tetsuo baby monster. And visually, I've never been 100% sure of what we're supposed to take away from the various stages of progress we see Tetsuo's wave pattern at. On a very basic level, it very clearly grows throughout the course of the movie, but I've always felt like the scientists know something I don't, and that bothers me.
True. And, I mean, the music's cool, right? When we hear, like, the little song that the wave pattern plays.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, that's really all I take away from it, though.
Yeah, I wish there was a little bit more information there. But, withholding information makes it seem deeper.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting how that happens?
Man, I feel like we've really shit on this movie, and I did not intend to do that. I love this movie. I really do. I really love this movie.
I enjoyed this movie.
I know you just enjoyed this movie. Akira's back. They have... and speaking of the religious stuff that you were kind of refuting before, the kids sitting in front of Akira to try to bring him back, it looks like they're praying.
Okay.
That's what they're doing. They're sitting in this kind of prone praying position.
I mean, it's not that I can't buy it. I can buy that there's... I love that the girl rescues the colonel in this scene, that she gets him out of harm's way.
Yeah.
I can buy that there's Christian imagery in a Japanese movie. I'm not saying that I can't buy that. I don't know. Maybe it's like you stated, that maybe I just generally think it doesn't have very much meaning when
There was another thing
I see it used.
When the space cannon, the Soul Cannon, was destroyed and it started raining down on the Earth, I think that you could probably draw the comparison to the biblical end times prophecy of fire raining down on the Earth. Right?
Yeah, I mean, you could. Again, you could, but I don't know. I just don't. It's really hard for me to pull that kind of stuff out of a Japanese movie. It's hard for me to think that that's where they were going. It's not a part of their culture the way it's a part of our culture.
No, I mean, and
like they don't have images of biblical end times raining hellfire down onto the earth like we do.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't think I would have as much a problem with the religious cult in the movie as a story element, or as even, because it's more like a background, like world building element. But
yeah,
I wouldn't have as much of a problem with it if the movie actually, kind of parlayed that into something interesting to say about that and science. The movie constantly plays with the fear of scientific progress and ethical scientific practices, but it has nothing to say about what happens when science comes up against religious conservatism, despite the religious elements and symbolism that are just scattered throughout this entire story.
Yeah.
Because it's all over this. Whether or not you believe it's Christian specifically, that is the perspective that I'm approaching it from, because I'm more familiar with Christianity than any other religion, but undoubtedly there are other religions that share this, similar enough concepts, if not identical concepts.
Yeah, of course.
That you could draw this to any of those modern religions.
Here's the scene where we're getting all the flashbacks, but they're going to be mixed up between the different kids.
Yes. So, so basically, Kaneda is inside the field, and his consciousness is being melded with Tetsuo's, Akira's, and the three children. And basically what happened is 26 jumped in after Kaneda to try to save him, and then the other two children said, well, if we go in, we might be able to save him if we work together, but we won't be able to come out. So they decided to do that. They decided to go into the field to work together to get Kaneda out. And while he's in there, he's seeing all of this crazy psychedelic imagery and all of these flashbacks, that some of which belong to Tetsuo, some of which belong to Akira, some of which belong to the children. And I think it fills in some of the gaps in the story. I think that this is kind of important stuff that we're seeing right now. What with all the kids that were experimented on, seeing them playing in this facility, and
it definitely
we actually
was
get to see this.
Some much needed backstory.
The child walking around here, I believe, is a child, a childlike projection of Kaneda himself. He's seeing himself as a child in these memories, seeing these things happen to these kids, even though he was never actually with them as a child, right?
You mean the one
who walked into the room and saw Akira on the...
I thought that was the
26?
the one who flies around in the hover chair.
Oh, Louis Anderson? Life with Louis?
Huh? What?
What? I'm sorry. The fat one, right?
Yes.
The fat one looks like the Louis Anderson cartoon character from Life with Louis. Do you remember Life with Louis?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Someone out there remembers Life with Louis. God.
It's not me.
He looks like okay. Moving on. Damn it.
I'm sure someone else will
I was confident
remember.
that joke was gold. Solid gold. Oh, my God. Anyway. So there's an interesting statement about prophecy, I think, in what Tetsuo says about the people calling him Akira. He says this to Kaori, because she's like, who's this Akira guy that everybody's calling you? And he says that basically, I think that basically what he says is that they will believe anything that appears close enough to what Akira is in their mind. And I think that's interesting. Those who believe in supernatural foresight might be willing to vindicate their beliefs with anything that fills enough of those requirements. And to me,
It's close enough.
I think it's a form of confirmation bias. I think that works on the same level. But number 25's actual verifiable gift of foresight fits into this as a rejection of fate, I believe. She can see the course that we are all on, but she acknowledges that course can deviate.
Yeah.
Right? And like she said this earlier in the movie, we can choose the future. You know, she says that if they work together, they can actually choose their own future and choose how all of this turns out. It's not set in stone. There is no fate, right? Which also insinuates that there is no higher being that is all powerful and all knowing and knows where everything is going to go.
And in all control.
And in all control all the time. Yes, exactly. So
now they go after Kaneda, right? And to go rescue him from this. But what about all the other people that, I mean, I have to assume that lots and lots of people got trapped inside this bubble, right?
I was wondering the same thing.
Am I wrong about that? Was it only like just there at the very center, and that this explosion that's destroying the city, like, I mean, like this doctor's about to get sucked into it.
Right. And that's interesting because we don't see how that works like on a conscious level.
And there were all those people who were standing and watching from a pretty close distance.
And you got to assume that they're all sucked into this thing, but we only see the result of Kaneda's consciousness melding with just the characters we care about, right?
And also, like I said, that, you know, the kids are like, oh, this wasn't Kaneda's fault. He didn't have anything to do with this, and so they decide to go rescue him and bring him back out. But I mean, all the other people who really were, you know, just sitting in their apartment reading the newspaper or whatever, like they really didn't have anything to do with it, and no one went in to save them.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we have to assume that there are people inside these buildings. I have a note about it.
I have a note about it.
Why would they have left these buildings? Why would they have left?
There wouldn't have been enough time. I mean, but if not to be, you know, overly pragmatic about, you know, well, they wouldn't have known how to do this because that doesn't work. Plot hole. You know,
I'm just saying, you know, that they made a big deal out of going in there after Kaneda, but I don't see why he's any more important than everyone else.
I guess because they know him. I mean, and their whole thing about going in after him is that it's not his fault. Like, none of this is his fault. But it's none of those other people's fault.
It's way more his fault than it is any of the people who...
At least he's directly involved with the people.
like I said, the people sitting in their living room reading the newspaper...
Or the military or the religious cult or, you know... Anybody who was caught in that giant wave that just sucked up and teleported, you know, a huge chunk of the city,
right,
to a different universe.
Whatever, it's cool.
Oh well, plot hole.
No, just I don't care. Maybe it was kind of how that went. Is we're just gonna not worry about it.
When Kay calls to Kaneda. She's doing it psychically, like I said, but at first it kind of confused me because I thought that when she called to him, he had been teleported out already, and he was like on the sidewalk or something. He was on a street on the outside.
Yeah.
Because he looks up, and then there's a shot of the outside of the energy bubble, but actually what it was him on a piece of like concrete inside, I think.
Yeah.
And she was calling to him psychically. He wasn't out yet because
I was confused.
One of the shots after that, he's still in it and getting sucked into the center of it before he gets teleported out. So that was kind of confusing to me.
I still don't remember this character's name.
It's Kai. They only say it one time.
Okay, that's Kai.
They say it one time. Yeah, exactly. The children, they will reiterate this at the very, very end, which we're coming up right on. We're very, very close to the end of the movie. But they use the phrase someday. They don't say what someday, but they say it has already begun and someday we will ellipses, right? They don't say exactly what that is.
There are a couple sentences here at the very end where they just do some little dots at the end there. Only 3. Thank you.
Right. And I think that it's supposed to be, you know, up to your interpretation. I don't know what your interpretation is supposed to be exactly, but I do think in an interesting way it can be interpreted to cement what I think is the main message of the movie, you know, about the scientific progress and you know, the moderation of scientific progress and all that kind of stuff. Because it is about Not yet, but someday, right? We're not ready for it, but someday we will be.
Yeah.
Right? That kind of thing. And they talk about how Kay is the most important person right now because maybe she's the one who will have her psychic ability awakened and have it not be all consuming.
Right.
And maybe she represents the true next step, the moderate step, but the next step in human evolution. So, we're at the end of the movie. If we are to believe that what is happening at the end of this movie is that Akira is creating a new universe for Tetsuo to exist in safely, can't we also assume that that's what happened in 1988? What was the reason for Akira doing it then? And aren't Akira and the children trapped inside that universe with Tetsuo? Right? Why didn't Akira disappear altogether when he did this the first time? Or perhaps Akira simply created a universe for Tetsuo to be a god of, and maybe that's what he's been doing in his own universe before the children summon him back to this one. I don't know, lots of questions. And so many people, I think, especially online, have theorized what this ending is exactly. And after reading a lot about it and thinking about it for myself, I honestly can't say I know for sure.
I mean, I didn't realize until you explained it to me that there was a question about this ending. I didn't understand that. I mean, to me, I thought it was pretty straightforward that he created a universe because they say he created a universe, or they assume that it looks like the creation of a universe.
And we get cosmic imagery at the end and that kind of thing.
And we get like a little 2001 Space Odyssey thing going on with the tunnel and everything, right?
And like the last line of the movie is I am Tetsuo, and that being kind of like I am as in the great I am, as in Yahweh, and you know, taking it back to the concept of God or Christian God, I guess.
So I felt like a universe was created, they're in it, and then it vanishes. And that was that.
Yep.
Maybe even vanishes. Like, the only ambiguity for me was maybe it vanishes into Kaneda or something like that.
Yeah.
But or not.
Question mark. Lots of question
marks.
But
it didn't really bother me or affect me either way, and it didn't really.
I think that if you pay attention to this movie, I think at the end of the day, what you can take away from it is not that it's difficult to understand. It's that there are a lot of things left unanswered, probably intentionally.
Yes, I would assume that they're intentionally left unanswered.
I think as far as like exactly what's happening, like by the letter what is happening, you can pretty well watch this movie and say, well, they said that a new universe was being created, so obviously Akira is creating a new universe for Tetsuo to be in because he's too dangerous for this universe. Right? And that's what the ending is. That's what all that means. The fact that Kaneda is experiencing all of their other memories, that fills in gaps about where the kids came from and what all that was and how Akira was among them, and you know, he just happened to be I
really wasn't confused by it.
I wasn't confused by it either, but I do have lots of questions.
I have lots of questions.
And that's different. That's a different thing.
Yes, it is.
It's a different thing.
It is. And the only stuff that I would say that's confusing in this movie, and it's not that I think it's confusing, I just think it's muddled in boring technobabble that you have to slow your subtitles down and speed your brain up so that you can try and figure out what they're talking about, only to learn that it doesn't matter because it's just technobabble anyways. So, well,
my last point, at the end of the movie, the children reiterate the concept of someday something happening, and that something has already begun. I feel like this is the final point in the film's core message about socially responsible scientific progress that occurs in moderation. The film believes that we can know too much or have too much power for our time and place in the universe, and that these things require wisdom to temper. K represents a hopefully moderate step forward in human evolution, and not the dangerous forward leap that Akira and Tetsuo represent, or the pernicious dismantling of necessary childlike ignorance that 25, 26, and 27 represent. The film argues for the ignorance, for that kind of childlike ignorance, as a vital step in moving forward, and that's my take on Akira.
Okay.
Basically.
I clearly had less of a take.
That's
just
okay.
All together.
We are already through the credits. We've got to wrap this up, but it's fun. This was a good way to start our month of anime films, and we'll be bringing you 4 more throughout the month of March. So stay tuned. Now that we've reached the end of the movie, we'd like to read a 5-star review that we received on iTunes. This review comes from Plo Koon with a subject line, really fun and insightful podcast. If you like movies and podcasts, there's a good chance you'll love Dustin and Jessica, two people who obviously know each other and movies. They found a way to be entertaining with zero dull moments. They analyze good movies and they are coming up with fun facts about them. I've been listening to a ton of movie podcasts and this is one of the best I've found. Excellent. Thank you so much for that.
That's awesome. Thank you. If you'd like to leave us a rating and review on iTunes, we'd really appreciate it. And if it's a 5-star review, we'll even read it on the show.
As always, you can find us on our website at popcornpoops.com. Please follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook if you'd like to receive updates about the show, including our weekly movie still identification game. If you have a question, comment, or movie request for us, you can reach us on our social media outlets or by emailing us at thepopcornpoops@gmail.com.
Next week, we'll be continuing our month of anime films with Mamoru Hosoda's 2006 film, The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. If you have any questions about that movie or related topics you'd like us to discuss, please contact us through social media or email.
Thanks for listening, and until next time, take care.
Bye-bye.
We are the Popcorn Poops.
Every week on the In Session Film Podcast, you can expect to hear reviews on all of the latest movies, big films, small films, and everything in between. We'll also do top 3 segments relating back to our main review. We discuss all of the latest movie news and rumblings, as well as have movie series and other fun segments. And we always talk about the films that we're watching and why you should watch them or not watch them as well. If you want to learn more about the In Session Film Podcast, check us out online at InSessionFilm.com. You can hear our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, TuneIn Radio, and so much more. In fact, you can listen to everything we have straight from our website. Again, that is InSessionFilm.com. Download our podcast, check us out, and come join us every week. We'd love to hear from you.